Hi, David Ellenstein here, Artistic Director of North Coast Repertory Theater. Thank you for tuning in today to our theater conversations. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. That would help us out a lot. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christopher Williams. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of North Coast Repertory Theater. And today, I am actually going to have a conversation with our Artistic Director, David Ellenstein. Hello, David.
Hi, Christopher. This is a different seat for me.
It is indeed. It's going to be fun. I think our audience will like to hear some of your, your perspectives on what you've been asking a lot of the other people.
All right.
So first off, you have been Artistic Director of North Coast for 17 years now. A lot has happened during that time, but I want to go back a little further, obviously, into your past. So you grew up in LA with a father who was an amazing actor, amazing character actor on various TV shows and film, and you were surrounded by so many of these some of them icons, really, of LA and Hollywood. I mean, what did that do growing up? How did that affect you growing up in LA around your dad and stuff?
Well, to me, I thought it was normal. I thought that's how everybody grew up. I thought everybody's living room was filled with actors and acting students and people in discussions, having coffee and arguing and being passionate about things. And there was open house all the time. Isn't that how everybody grew up?
Oh, yeah, of course.
There was always coffee on. People were walking in and out. Our door was never closed. And when it was closed, it wasn't locked. People just walked in. So I grew up around that. Some of the people were well-known. Some of them weren't well-known. It didn't make any difference. So I grew up thinking that that's how everybody grew up. So to me, it was kind of just normal. And I was lucky enough when I was 4 years old to see my dad do Irma La Douce on the national tour with Juliet Prowse. And they had this curtain call, this crazy curtain call in it at the end, in which my dad did all these wild things. And I thought, at 4 years old, I thought, he looks like he is having so much fun. I've never seen anybody have that much fun. That's what I'm going to do. And it kind of never changed. I kind of decided at 4 years old, I'm going to do this too, because I hadn't seen anything that looked like it was so much fun. So then I'm in sixth grade or sixth grade, and we're doing our culmination. So I wrote with my best friend, Steve Chapman, and I directed and I starred in our culmination play called Dr. Livingston, I Presume, about the meeting between Dr. Livingston and Henry Stanley. And it was about a 20-minute thing that I wrote and co-wrote with Steve, directed, and played Dr. Livingston in. So I kind of started that ball rolling at that age. In ninth grade, I played the stage manager in Our Town, in our junior high school's production of Our Town. And my father gave me one piece of advice. He said, because the stage manager comes out at the beginning of the play and addresses the audience with a long monologue. He said, the only advice I'm going to give you is that when you walk out there at the beginning, stand there, stock still until there is not a sound in the auditorium before you speak the first word. And it was terrifying. I mean, that idea was terrifying, but I did it.
Wow.
And it was a powerful lesson of pulling the focus to the exact spot where you want it before you give what you have to give. And it's something I carried with me, I still carry with me, that stillness and silence can pull focus in like nothing else. The biggest movement in the world can't pull focus like that. Learned that through other examples throughout my career, watching Jonathan McMurtry work. Sometimes him just standing there and listening would be far more compelling than all the activity going on around him on stage. So I watched it, in practicality happen throughout my life.
And because he's engaged, right? Staying engaged in that stillness.
Right.
That real listening.
Right.
Wow. That's amazing. That's in ninth grade?
That was in ninth grade. Yeah, ninth grade. That I found that there. And it was helpful. You know, I was lucky. I grew up going on movie sets and on TV sets. You know, one week I was on Wild Wild West, the next week I was on Mission Impossible. You know, just watching all this stuff, and it was just normal. Or going to rehearsals, because my father also ran a small theater in Los Angeles during all this time. So I would be going to rehearsals and watching the rehearsals, helping to build the sets. Going to dress rehearsals, going to opening night, watching the entire process happen. So it was kind of in my blood and what I knew from that was passed on from my father.
Right.
And since I'm talking about this, probably the most profound and important experience I had as a theater artist, and maybe even in life. My father and I went in 1986 to see the Stratford Company from Canada do a production of King Lear, starring Douglas Campbell. And it was a big production. It had about 40 people in it. It had cannons that went off. It had, you know, massive battles. It had all kinds of stuff in it. And it was good. 2 days later, we went and saw 5 actors from the Royal Shakespeare Company do King Lear. 5 actors playing all the parts with no sets, no costumes, no props. The guy who played Edmund played Edgar and fought himself. And it was dynamic and scary. The gal who played Cordelia also played the fool. It was filled with all this doubling, but the text and the story and the emotion that went with the story had never been clearer. And it's so impacted both me and my father in a way that the big one had not, with all the bells and whistles. This one had it all. So we decided to do Hamlet that way. And my father was going to direct and I was going to play Hamlet. And we spent the next 6 months meeting 2 or 3 times a week in his living room, reading the play, cutting the script, figuring out how we were going to do it. We decided to do it with 6 actors. And we did it. It was very successful. We did it in 87 and again in 88 and again in 94. So we kept bringing it back because it was so popular and successful, and we won a bunch of awards and all that. But more than that, what I've realized in looking back on that experience is what my father was doing. And I think sort of unconsciously, he was passing along to me everything that he knew about the theater, his passion, his knowledge, his experience. And he was also passing along to me what life was about for him. And I didn't realize until probably 10 years later that that's what he had done. And I'm not sure he ever realized it quite that specifically.
Right.
He had basically passed on what he had built over a lifetime to me. And it's what I've always walked on since then, because I grew up and graduated as an actor, as a theater person, and as a person during the course of doing that particular production of Hamlet. As someone smarter than me said, if you understand Shakespeare, you understand the world. Wow. And you understand humanity. And boy, I learned it there in a way I'd never before.
Wow. So that's amazing that your dad actually, just somehow almost through osmosis kind of, imparted that wisdom on you. Did you ever get any other people like maybe some of his, cohorts or whatever that passed on any kind of things like that to you as well?
I already mentioned Jonathan McMurtry, who was a dear friend of mine, who, funny enough, I also met in a different production of Hamlet earlier, where I was playing a small part and assistant stage managing, and he was playing Claudius. And we became friends then, and we stayed friends for the rest of his life. For going forward, he just passed away last year. But I certainly learned a lot from him. He was a mentor for me. And then another person that was a mentor for me, Jeffrey Sherman, who was a wonderful director and artistic director. I also met sort of through my father, because he had directed my father in a play. And I met Jeffrey and his wife, Diana, and his very, very, very young daughter, Alice, way back then. And Jeffrey and I did a lot of work together. Jeffrey would bring me to Portland Repertory Theater when he was the artistic director there. He would bring me to the Meadowbrook Theater in Michigan when he was the artistic director there. And then he brought me down to the Alabama Shakespeare Festival when he was the artistic director there. And it's great to know Alice, who has now grown up into being a beautiful young woman and a wonderful actor on her own, has come to North Coast now several times.
That's right.
Been an actor for us. And Jeffrey came and actually directed 2 shows during my tenure. And in fact, the last show he directed in his life was How the Other Half Loves, which you were in, Chris.
I was lucky enough to be a part of that with him. He's
Right.
amazing.
Yeah, and I learned from Jeffrey. I learned a lot of my directing skill and protocol of how I comport myself as a director. I mean, Jeffrey was a wonderful director and technician in how he directed, but there was something about his style that I always admired and tried to emulate. His inclusion of the actors into the process, his inclusion of everybody in the room into the process, and that sometimes where information can come from that can make a product better is not where you expect it to come from. An assistant stage manager or a prop person can say something that they don't even realize necessarily is important, but suddenly it illuminates something in the play that hadn't been thought of by the director or the actors. And so including everybody into that process and making them feel welcome and confident to add what they have to add to the process is really, really important. And also understanding that there has to be joy in what we do. There has to be, we have to be playing. We're putting on plays. And as much as you want to work hard and be serious about what you're doing, if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to, 1, you're not going to do your best, and 2, what's the point?
Because and I love that. You say that before every first reading, is that we have to enjoy what we're doing, and it's so right. I mean, it puts everybody in the correct mindset of that we are all in this together, and we are going to create something together. And I think that's one of your major strong suits as a director, is you allow the actors, being an actor yourself, you have the language to talk to each actor, each designer, and get what you need out of them, but also listen to what's happening in the room and take ideas from everybody. I think that is, it's a wonderful talent that you have because of that, and everybody wants to work with you because of that.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, and the 3 people I mentioned, who are probably the 3 people I consider my most important mentors in my life, certainly my father, who was the most passionate, full-out character of anybody I've ever met. You know, I was lucky enough to have that as my dad, and what an exciting thing to have. Jonathan, whose mantra was always be available. He always talked about making yourself available and listening, and I learned that from him. And then Jeffrey, the comportment, the gentle and kind nature of the business, and how you can have that, and that will lead you to creating the best work, because everybody will feel empowered to do their best work, because they're not worried about somebody criticizing them or putting them down. Everybody's there working towards the same thing. And the more you can create that in a room, the better off you are. Now, all 3 of the people I just mentioned have passed away. So the interesting thing for me at this point in my life is all my mentors are gone. So I guess that means I have to be a mentor now. If I'm going to pass this along to the next generation, and theater is going to stay alive in the way I hope that it does, I have to now be communicating this to younger people and trying to imbue that understanding in them.
I have to say you are doing that, because I have always thought of you as a mentor, not just a friend, but ever since I first got to work with you in, 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I have since then followed you and really have tried to learn the things that you, give to actors, to directors. I've watched you a lot, and thankfully I'm in the position of being your associate, so I actually get to watch even your day-to-day, how you even run the theater.
That's not always so pretty.
Yeah, well, that's a different part of the job, yeah. But I want to go back to your directing. How did you get involved in directing? I mean, you started out as an actor. What was your first,
Well, again, I'll start back with my dad, who always said, if you want to make a living in this business, the more strings you have in your bow, the better chance you got. If you can be an actor, the more kinds of plays you can act in, the better. If you can direct as well. If you can teach as well, because in order to survive in show business, especially in the theater, you better be able to be multi-talented and do lots of different disciplines, because it's not always going to be coming your way. So I always had in my mind that that was important. As I started working in regional theater and theater in Los Angeles, I would sit in rehearsal as a young actor and watch directors not say what seemed obvious to me needed to be said, either to an actor or to a designer or about the play in general. And I'd go, well, why aren't they just saying such and such? I'd see them come at it from very strange, what seemed to me strange angles, rather than going at what was at the heart of what the play was and what the people needed to hear. And also, so many directors that didn't understand that everybody needs to hear things differently, that not everybody can hear things the same way. And so you need to tailor how you communicate to the person you're trying to communicate with. And I got this really early on. So when I got the chance to start directing readings, because I was a member of a group in LA called Theater 40 in Beverly Hills when I was young. And I started directing readings there, and I probably did about 30 readings of well-known plays. They were established plays, they weren't new plays. And I learned how to communicate with actors doing those, and how to illuminate. We only had 2 rehearsals, but how do you illuminate the text? How do you make the text come through the actors and reach the audience? And which is really what the essence of what a director does, is taking a play and communicating it to the audience, making sure that all the elements are communicating what the play is about to the audience. And so they walk out with what the play is about. So as opportunities started to come up at Theater 40, first I got to be a guest director at a college where I was also guest faculty. And then I got actually an opportunity, an important one for me was I directed in San Diego at the old Gaslamp Quarter Theater Company, where I had acted a couple of times. I talked to my friend Kit Goldman, who had founded and was running the theater, about coming up to LA to see a production of this play, Shayna Maidel, by Barbara Lebo. And I directed it, I believe it was 1990, 89 or 90 maybe. But it was I immersed myself completely in it. I got a cast that was completely committed to doing it. And we put on a really good production of it. It was filled with difficulties too, because we had technical problems with some of the designers, and the way it all went down wasn't smooth, but it was a passionate and committed and successful production. I've since done the play again. I did it at North Coast a second time, and you were in it. But that early production was seminal for me as a director, to understand that I had the skill, that I had the wherewithal to be the person in the room that was steering the ship. And you have to, a director has to feel confident in that, so confident that you can allow yourself to be wrong and listen to other people who have better ideas. You have to be that confident.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not, then it's just your thing, and and it's going to be narrow. But if you want it to have breadth, you have to be able to listen to other people who might have better ideas than you and implement them. Be willing to let go of what you thought, because this is a better way to go with it. So that's really important.
So how is it different then when you approach a play as an actor to a director? Do you approach them the same way? Are they a little different for you?
They're quite different. As an actor, one needs to be monofocused on that role. Who is that person? How do they behave? How do they process information? How does their existing circumstances affect how they are as a being? Their history, everything about where they are. And so it becomes very kind of a microcosm of that person, and then walking into that world of the play. As a director, you are instead looking at the play as an entirety, and you are thinking about how that play wants to hit an audience, and how can you best make the choices, lead the actors through the text, create the designs that will leave the audience with what you believe the kernel of that play is, that the author intends for them to take away. Even if it's just experiencing a world that they're not used to or unfamiliar with, how do you best create that so that the audience will be able to access it? It will be most accessible to the audience. So it's a larger, wider view than an actor's view. And I'll extrapolate out a little farther and talk about being an artistic director.
I was just going to ask you.
Yeah. And not only are you looking at the 7 plays in your season, but you are looking at the entire community of the theater. as a staff, as a audience, and as a community at large? Where do you sit in the world of the entire organization? And so it extrapolates out again and becomes a bigger, wider picture that has more consequences and more elements to it. So it narrows down to the actor who's so specific. I always say when I am an actor, I have to get my nap. I have to be focused. It's hard for me to be an artistic director when I'm being an actor because I need to be so focused on that role. As a director, it's a step back. I can merge the two sort of. As a director, I can still run in my office on the breaks and check my emails and see who needs me and this and that and do what. As an actor, I can't do that so much, right? As an artist, and I always used to like to say, I can come to work sometimes grumpy as a director. It's hard if you're grumpy as an actor to throw yourself into the play. You have to be prepped to be that actor focused in that really specific place. The director's wider, the artistic director's even wider. And so it's a different kind of focus. It's a wider beam of light, as it were, as an artistic director.
So why did you get involved in artistic directing? Is this something that just kind of just fell into your lap kind of thing, or did you pursue this? I mean, why? You could be directing, acting all over the place, and then, choosing a home.
This keeps coming back to me. My dad again said, if you want to make a living in the theater, you got to have a wife. So he was also an artistic director. So that was another skill. I always thought, well, someday I'd like to have my own theater. One, I get to pick the plays. I get to have the ultimate decision about who's going to direct the plays, who's going to act in the plays, who's going to design the plays. I get to actually influence how all the plays get put on, even if I'm not the director on them, because I usually direct 2 or 3 a year here. I get to influence those, so that's important. And then I'm going to say equally as important as that is when my wife and I had our first child, I was traveling all over the country. I was freelancing as a director and still an actor occasionally, but mostly a director by that point. And I was gone 6 months, 5-6 months out of the year, off working various corners of the world. I like to say I've worked everywhere from Anchorage, Alaska to Miami, Florida to Portland, Maine to San Diego, and most places in between. And it's true. So I was working all over the place, and we were having a baby. And this opportunity came up for North Coast Repertory Theater, and I decided to grab it. And it really was my wife Denise who pushed me all the way to it. I think you've heard me tell the story. Yeah. They called me, they asked me to apply for the job. And I hung up, I said, honey, they want me to apply for this job as artistic director. You remember that little theater in the back of the shopping center in Solana Beach down there? I would have to come and professionalize the company. I'd have to try and make it into an equity company. We'd have to move to San Diego. She said, you're applying, you're getting it, and we're moving. And literally before I even applied for the job, she started packing our house.
Wow.
Yeah, she. And I was like, I haven't even applied. She said, you're getting it, we're moving. So.
Wow. That's prophetic on her part.
Thank or curse Denise, depending on how you feel about my being here.
I think we're all blessed. Thank you, Denise. Now, she was an actor too. So how did you guys meet? Was it through that?
Well, I was guest faculty at Cal State Northridge, and I was directing a play, and she was actually an English major at the time, and she auditioned for the play, and I cast her in the play, and that's how we met, but it wasn't until 2 years later that we actually started dating. We were both involved with other people at that time, but we stayed in contact, and almost 2 years later is when we actually got together. But we met through theater. And then she acted with me, both with me as another actor, and also I directed her a number of times. Once she had children, she kind of moved away from the acting. As much as she was good at it, and it was a passion for her, it wasn't the only passion for her. Kind of to stay in this business, it has to be your undeniable passion.
Indeed. Yeah, for sure. So thinking about, I think maybe North Coast Rep, do you have any shows that really stand out that you think, okay, these are the ones? I know that's kind of hard.
It is.
You got a lot under your belt, so I mean.
I know.
Ones
I
that you
think about it.
directed or ones that other people? I mean, just something that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're up to about, I think since I've been here, we've done 140 shows.
Man.
So that's a lot to sort through. I was talking to Richard Baird earlier, and if anybody watched his interview, he brought up the one Way Downriver, which is one of my favorites. It's based on the Faulkner. I found that very exciting to do, and I thought we executed it well, and I thought it had a real theatrical experience to it that was good. I'm going to leave so many out. It's hard for me to even remember. And it's often, the most recent ones. I'm thinking of The Outsider that we just did, that you were in. It was so funny. It was so much fun. We had such a good time doing it. It was so many laughs. It was great to do, but there's been so many along the way. I have to bring up one other that was before I came to North Coast Rep.
Mhm.
And it's kind of why I got hired at North Coast Rep. It was Long Day's Journey into Night that I did at the space down at the Lyceum, where San Diego Rep is. I want to say it was 2001. It was right after 9/11. And Jonathan McMurtry, Rosina Reynolds, Brendan Ford, and Sean Cox, and Carla Cash played the housekeeper. But it was really good. It was exciting to work on that monster of a play. And Rosina has never been better. I mean, Rosina's been so good in so many things, but she was really awesome. And that Jonathan was so good, and Brendan and Sean, everybody was so good in that show. And even though hardly anybody saw it, one, because it was after 9/11, and two, because it's Long Day's Journey into Night, and it was 3 hours and 35 minutes long. That was cut. And because there was issues with marketing it and all that stuff, it made a real impression on those that did see it, so that when I came up for the position as artistic director, that was something that was pointed to as, oh, he directed that. Oh yeah, we should get him. So that was part of it, but that was an important one. I'm leaving out so many North Coast shows.
I know, I put you on the spot.
So many. If I took the list and I went through it, there'd probably be 30 of them. I would go, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one.
Right.
Yeah.
So now that you have all of these under your belt at North Coast, where do you see North Coast going? Where do you want it to go in the near future here?
Well, so when I got hired, I had 3 agenda items. One was to professionalize the company, because it was a quasi-professional volunteer organization when I got here, to make it a full equity theater, and to build a new venue. And I was able to accomplish the first 2 things in 2 years. So we professionalized the company, and we went to a full equity contract within 2 years. So meaning that we hired more professional union actors. So it opened up the spectrum of the actors that we could use and raise the overall quality of the casts across the board. But we are still chasing the dream of a new venue. We have outgrown our current facility 15 years ago. We are spread out all over the place. We're in so many different spaces now. And our theater, although the audience loves seeing a show, and its intimacy is great. And we have Marty Burnett, who is a wizard in what he does in there for each show. I need more depth. I need more height. I need wing space. The actors need a proper backstage and dressing rooms, and we don't need that many more seats. Another 150 seats would be great. 100, 150 seats would be awesome. But we really need the production facilities to really go to. That's the only thing missing from what we're doing. I will put most of our shows up there against shows I see anywhere, because I think the quality of what we do for where we are is just about as good as we can do in many cases. But we can't go that extra step with design. We can't go that extra step with some of the kinds of plays that we do, cast sizes, 2-story sets, more unusual kinds of, we just can't go to that next place until we have a new venue. And, it's an ongoing search for us. We're in an area of the world where property is really hard to come by, and location is everything. We don't want to abandon our subscribers. We want to stay near where we are now. And it's a difficult task, but we're still at it. I haven't given up, but we haven't given up. We're still looking.
Well, and you have a lot of support from obviously your staff and the board, as well as your patrons. they always say that, when are you going to get the new space? What do we have to do? What do we have to do? So I think there's that mutual goal. It's just the right timing, and everything. But well, thank you, David. This has been amazing to actually get to really actually interview you this time. You always get to ask the questions to everybody else. So I thank you so much. And I know the audience is going to have a great time listening to this and really getting to know more about you and how you developed as an artist. And I just have to say thank you from my perspective of being a mentor of mine and entrusting me in doing what I've been allowed to do. And
well, Chris, you do a great job, and you wear so many hats for us, and you do them all well. So thank you.
We all do. That's coming from you, though. I learned that stuff from you. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the rainy day out here.
I'm going to go for a swim in the yard right now.
Exactly. Well, thanks so much, David.